Hi ladies and gentlemen, this is Luke and welcome to Geek on Culture. In today's episode we will be looking at Star Wars and more importantly, what happened inside Lucasfilm and the current civil war that is raging behind the scenes of what was once the most loved franchise in the world. Now, for legal reasons, I would like to say this video is not meant to demean or disparage any persons associated either with Lucasfilm or Disney, and while a lot of this video is based on facts and can be easily verified and referenced, I will be sprinkling in my own opinions every now and then. On October the 30th, 2012, the WDC, that's the Walt Disney Company, purchased Lucasfilm from George Lucas for just above $4 billion. Now, when Disney bought the company, they thought they'd bought the goose that lays the golden egg. Let's face it, it's Star Wars. They should get their money back just on merchandising alone, right? Well, no. But, God, they've made it difficult for us fans to love what they've produced. One of the first things Kathleen Kennedy did after taking charge of the company was hire Kiri Hart to run LSG, Lucasfilm Story Group, which was going to be in charge of the story narrative moving forward. However, the first signs of concerns came in drips and drabs, as the fans started to hear rumours that the LSG were not interested in making Star Wars movies. They were more interested in hitting quotas for gender, sex and race inside their narratives. And this was to such an extent that Kiri Hart's first action as the head of the newly formed LSG was to make sure only women were allowed to guide the Star Wars universe. One of the major implications of this was the Star Wars gurus at Lucasfilm were kept out of the major decisions from between 2012 and 2015. Now that is important because 2012 and 2015 were the development time for the sequel trilogy. Dave Filoni, a Star Wars veteran and high guru of Star Wars, was completely kept out of any significant guidance for the films. Instead, writers with absolutely no Star Wars background were brought in to have discussions with Hart about how to bring more female characters into the Star Wars universe. When Kathleen and Hart pitched the ideas to Disney, Disney execs thought this would be a great way of bringing more girls into buying their Star Wars merchandise. They were wrong. See, women had already been buying the Star Wars merch. There are just as many women Star Wars fans and little girl Star Wars fans as there are in male and little boys. It really pisses me off when people say there's not. Despite this being one half of the original Star Wars demographic, the LSG and Kathleen Kennedy hires wanted nothing to do with the Star Wars of old. Their ridiculous and petty hatred of people groups went so far for them to draw a huge red X on Luke Skywalker, the main hero, arguably the main hero and protagonist of the original trilogy, in posters at Lucasfilm. To them, Luke represented the patriarchy and male dominance narratives. And for that reason alone, Luke would have to go. When J.J. Abrams was brought in to do The Force Awakens, with Lawrence Kasdan assisting in the writing, the guidance given to them from Kathleen Kennedy and the LSG was keep it simple, make a new hope for a new generation of Star Wars fans, make its protagonist a woman, and make Star Wars look like our own world. As Abrams has said from the very start, from the very beginning of discussions, the notion of women at the centre of the story was always something that was compelling and exciting for all that was involved. We knew that in addition to Leia, who was a critical piece of this puzzle, we wanted to have other women, not necessarily human, but definitely female. The trailer for The Force Awakens was leaning heavily on nostalgia and legacy characters. The fans were obviously going to love it. I remember sitting there and watching the trailer time and time again. I remember how my heart skipped a beat when I heard those iconic Star Wars sounds. The Force Awakens opened to an earth-shattering box office result. Despite harming the persona of one of the legacy characters and killing the same character off, fans were excited to find out what the new characters would do and how exactly the First Order came about. To be fair, many fans pointed out that this new galaxy far, far away needed to be fleshed out. It seemed weird that the work that they had done in the prequels and the original trilogy had essentially been undone. Let's face it, Anakin was meant to be the chosen one who was meant to bring around balance of the Force. That lasted less than 30 years. That is one shit prophecy. More on that later. Many fans were also disappointed that Luke, Leia and Han had not been seen together, but surely they'd bring him back as a ghost or a vision or maybe even a flashback. Anything to get the original trilogy together. But due to the financial success of the first movie, mostly due to the fact that it was a reskin of A New Hope, the Disney executives made the decision to give Kathleen Kennedy full creative control over the Star Wars universe. Now, behind the scenes, she was already having director issues. Rogue One was a mess, and at the time was already getting rid of the current leader on that film. But beyond that, there was another problem brewing. And that problem was Colin Trevorrow. Unbeknownst to fans and many journalists, the LSG had been working with Ruin Johnson on the big flip that was expected for the current trilogy. Just as fans were shocked that Vader was Luke's father, this time the surprise would be that Luke was a failure and Rey was a nobody. While Abrams had worked with Kasdan on the Force Awakens script, Johnson was working with LSG in a way that not even Jar Jar Abrams was aware of. For weeks, Rian Johnson would meet with Kiri Hart's story group behind closed doors, planning out a detour for The Last Jedi. Now, back to Colin Trevorrow, the problem was that the director for Episode 9 needed to know what the hell was going to happen in Episode 8 before he could even get formulas for ideas together. With Jar Jar Abrams and Kasdan blind to what Johnson and the LSG was doing, it was Trevorrow who would receive an outline first for The Last Jedi. From many sources inside Lucasfilm, what he read shocked him, made him feel sick, and he immediately started making phone calls. He spoke to both Kathleen Kennedy and Kiri Hart and explained, "I cannot do Episode 9 without Luke. The fans will go berserk if there is no Luke. We need to put Luke back in the script." The answer he got was short and simple: no. He would have to use the current Last Jedi concepts to finish the trilogy off. Confused and concerned, Trevorrow contacted Mark Hamill to gain leverage, but Hamill had zero influences with the LSG, and Hamill himself was disgusted with the role of Luke in Episode 8, stating once, "That is not my Luke. I play this character as if he's Luke's distant cousin, Jake." So, ever valiant, Trevorrow began working on a different idea, one that will essentially resurrect Luke Skywalker, explain Force Ghost concept, and have all of the old Jedi rejoin together to help Rey defeat the Sith forever. Upon finding out that Trevorrow was refusing to let Luke Skywalker go, Kathleen Kennedy was reportedly furious and simply fired him on the spot. Then came the movie release date, and while attempting to steer the narrative online through influence reviews and by access media, the fan reaction was quick and abrupt. This wasn't Star Wars. The Last Jedi had divided the once proud fandom of Star Wars, but in addition, it had failed to meet financial expectations dramatically. Kathleen Kennedy once went on record to say, well, Empire had a low box office all haul than A New Hope too, forgetting to mention that The New Hope was in theatres around the world for months and months longer than Empire Strikes Back. But this did absolutely nothing to stop the torrent of backlash and negative feedback from the fans. Very quickly, the tides began to turn on Star Wars and Lucasfilm. Gone were the days that Star Wars could do no wrong. Gone were the days where the worst thing that was produced was a Christmas special, which still holds more charm than the whole sequel trilogy. The high-ups in the LSG, as well as Ruin Johnson, began to blame the fans. Surely it was all the fans' fault that they don't like our crapshoot story with no decent characters and an overpowered hero, and a Sith that acts like an emo that's been told to clean his room. But the damage was already done. While Bob Iger had signed off on The Last Jedi, he immediately recoiled when he saw the fan reaction to Episode 8. This was something that was never seen before either by Pixar or Marvel. This was a mass disgust from fans, while at the same time the director of the film, Ruin Johnson, was going online and attacking the fans, once stating, if someone is responding negatively to diversity, fuck him. That guy's a dick. While the public presentation of protecting The Last Jedi by Disney continued, the writing was on the wall behind executive closed doors. As Solo lost its director, again fired by Kennedy, Iger's confidence had come to an end. She was scrubbed from his autobiography, and Iger reached out to Jon Favreau to begin writing the ship of Star Wars. Favreau was the best Disney had out of anyone they had worked with. And best of all, he was proven. Let's face it, he did pretty much get the whole MCU off the ground. I know Kevin Feige receives a lot and deserves a lot of credit, but Favreau, who was the one who created the blueprint for what we call the Marvel movies, Favreau was the only director to have created a holiday classic in decades. Favreau was also working on new filming technology that blew away anything that was on the market at the time. Iger saw Favreau as the new modern-day George Lucas, and even while people like Lasseter and even Bob Iger were being pulled into the Me Too controversies, Favreau was known industry-wide as being ethically outstanding. In late 2017, Favreau had begun to talk to produce a series for Disney Plus based in the Star Wars universe. Iger had arranged the talks and was ready to back Favreau with a full movie-sized budget in an attempt to give their future streaming service something to get going. Sources inside both Disney and Lucasfilm have gone on record to state you could forget the talking points from Disney about how Favreau wanted to move to streaming. He's one of the most respected big-budget directors in the world. He doesn't ask to lower himself to streaming services unless there is already a much larger plan in place. In Iger's opinion, Netflix represents the biggest threat to Disney over time, and the company was about to focus huge amounts of attention to their online plans. Favreau was put into contact by Dave Filoni by Kathleen Kennedy. That's a joke and a half, isn't it? Favreau wanted someone who knew Star Wars inside and out, and Filoni wasn't much interested in working with LSG, so he went to work with Favreau. Kennedy was busy with the big stuff, and a small show on streaming services was below her pay grade. Little did she know what Iger and Favreau had been cooking. But after the public reception nightmare of The Last Jedi, the DVD and Blu-ray sales tanked, and after Solo's directors were fired, Solo became the first ever Star Wars movie to lose money. Kathleen Kennedy's reign of terror was over. Yes, she was still the big figurehead. Yes, she had a contract extension, but Iger went to such extreme degree that he even publicly killed the expected future Star Wars releases after the sequel trilogy was concluded. For Disney, this was unheard of, but Kennedy was allowed to stay on, bitter and mostly powerless, as removing her was deemed too potentially damaging and would receive too much negative feedback from the press. All the while, the toy sales cratered and the video game revenues hit rock bottom. Yes, EA are a bunch of dicks. The Rise of Skywalker barely made half of what The Force Awakens had made at the box office. The Disney execs began working with Favreau more and more. Kennedy would develop some minor Star Wars properties going forward, and while her first animated show, The Resistance, was dismally received by fans, Favreau and his Star Wars guru, Filoni, were given the green light to go big with their series, The Mandalorian. At the time, the Disney executive knew that if The Mandalorian had failed, Star Wars would be universally hated and Disney Plus would limp out the gate behind greats like Amazon Prime and Netflix. So in a rare move, Filoni was given complete and total power over The Mandalorian. Kennedy could only give him notes, but she had no control on any decision that Favreau made. In one such note, she recommended to Favreau that he used Boba Fett as the lead character. Favreau simply said no and walked away. In the middle of all this, Galaxy's Edge at Disneyland had opened in late May of 2019, whereas Iger had announced to the world that crowds would flock to the new Star Wars expansion, without many major advertisements. Disneyland itself had just been through a multi-million-dollar renovation to handle the increased crowd size. Galaxy's Edge was a flop. It was actually that bad the attendance rates for when Galaxy's Edge opened back in 2019 dropped. The destruction of Star Wars was complete, and now expectations inside Disney were that The Mandalorian might just fail just because it has Star Wars in the title. Kennedy took this opportunity to talk to Iger. Many have reported on this before, but stating, Kennedy said, "See, I didn't fail with Star Wars, the fans just hate it." Then, on November the 12th, 2019, The Mandalorian launched on Disney+, and it was an instant hit with the fans. Fans loved it, the press loved it, and the popularity of the show grew over time. It returned looking like a Star Wars film from the original trilogy. It was devoid of all the flaws of the Kathleen Kennedy Star Wars brand, and best of all in Disney's eyes, it wasn't just popular, it was selling Disney Plus and toys. People loved the new Baby Yoda character. The toy sales skyrocketed and manufacturing kicked into a very high gear. The same day the orders came through for more Mandalorian toys from Disney, another order from Disney came through, cancelling some, if not all, of the sequel trilogy toys. This was the beginning of the deletion of the sequel trilogy. Kennedy became increasingly bitter about the success of The Mandalorian, the one Star Wars property that she had no control over. Kiri Hart fled Lucasfilm to join Ruin Johnson as T Street Studios, which had not produced a single success in 2 years, so the Ruin Johnson trilogy died that day as well. Kennedy continued to work on more series within the Star Wars universe, but was given no theatrical releases and Favreau had complete control to do whatever he wanted with the brand. His plans involved a streaming version of the MCU, with multiple cinema-quality shows interwoven into a narrative that culminates in cultural events. The ultimate catastrophe came in 2020. Just as a global pandemic was about to strike, Kennedy lost yet another director, this time even worse. This time it was for Indiana Jones 5. This was her only theatrical release she had left in her quiver. But this wasn't just another one, this was a stinging rebuke, as the director was Steven Spielberg. Kathleen Kennedy's first major role had been Spielberg's assistant on the original Indiana Jones film. Now, decades later, she has lost his confidence. Steven Spielberg walked away. James Mangold would be brought on as his replacement, and he would write the script with input from Harrison Ford. So begun the franchise war has. There is a civil war behind closed doors at Lucasfilm, and there are now 3 separate divisions inside the once loved studio. There is the old-timers, the apolitical, non-ideological artisans who remember the good old days of George Lucas. Most of them are just trying to keep their heads down and not get fired by Kathleen Kennedy's crew. The Kathleen Kennedy crew, on the other hand, they're the ones that have been hired since 2012. These are the ones, great minds behind the sequel trilogy, that have now been relegated to comic book releases and young novels. The third and last group are the Favreau-Filoni bunch. That new bunch of Favreau loyalists brought in and generally work outside the confines of the LSG, and they get to bypass the Kennedy crew, and their budget comes straight from the top of Disney. Now, Favreau has come into the Star Wars universe and breathed life back into its empty shell. He has helped the fans reconnect with the show by honouring the fans and honouring the universe that him and Filoni love. Now, what are my opinions on the Star Wars sequel trilogy? Well, it ain't Star Wars. Now, some people might be sitting there going, that's because of Rey, she's like the bestest ever and all this. No. The reason I don't like it is because of the systematical assassination of the legacy characters. C-3PO and R2-D2 are relegated to doing nothing during all 3 films, and in their place we're given a goddamn beach ball that someone's glued a droid head to. Leia is turned into a Mary frickin' Poppins in the sequel, and is the only legacy character given any love and attention. Why is that? Because Kennedy loves female characters and hates anyone that's got a penis. Han Solo is turned from a rebel general and hero into a deadbeat dad and a shit smuggler who leaves the love of his life and his son when stuff gets a little bit difficult. And Luke isn't even a Jedi in these goddamn disgraces of a film. Luke in the extended universe was a hero to many, a Jedi and a symbol of hope in the galaxy. In this, he's a scared old hermit that lives on a planet sucking green tilt milk from an animal who tried to kill his nephew because he had a nightmare. This is not Star Wars. Now, I have information that proves that Disney are looking to delete the sequel trilogy and remove it from canon, and it all started the day Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni were hired to work together. But for now, we must live and hope that the Force will find a way to carry on. And one day, we will get Star Wars. Well everyone, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please leave a like and subscribe, as I have a lot more to say and reveal in the upcoming videos. From SETI Alpha 5 all the way to Epsilon 3. This has been Luke from Geek on Culture. See you next time, guys.